I'm going to ask our choreographers, our Crystal Rose Tedesco residents at Mathematics in Motion, to start with a little discussion of their pieces, and then we'll open up to questions. And I'll start with Rose today.
Hello, I'm Rose Shields. I choreographed Hypercube alongside my fellow dance artists Leo Briggs, Leah Beam, and Sally O'Grady, with my math mentor Sarah Pritchard, who's helped me figure out the meetings of the dance and math and movement. Yeah, I guess all I'll say is Hypercube was born out of this beautiful, flexible cube that you saw that was built by Julia Hill, who's a sculptor and a friend. And I was playing with the third and fourth dimensions, which Sarah was helping me understand how shapes can be seen and viewed from the fourth dimension into our existing third dimension. I was also playing with the idea that maybe the fourth dimension is time, which is not necessarily the case for mathematicians, but I like toying with that idea because I feel like it's the nearest way I can grasp onto what the fourth dimension might be like to exist in. Yeah.
Very nice. And Julie Gallagher.
Thank you. We explored the ellipse in shape and rhythm, and we did this with the help of Evans, who is my math mentor in here. And so I came in to the project with this idea about the ellipse as it relates to visual arts and literature, which comes from a theory by a poet and critic, Severo Sardui. That's his poem that you heard. And so I had all these ideas like from the humanities side, but then Evans helped me dig into the math. And so that's how we looked at shape and not shape, but movement and rhythm in this piece through geometry, and also looking at from the I guess in the intersection here where there's symmetry and asymmetry, or balance and imbalance.
Oh, very nice. And now you've had some time to think up some questions, I hope. And if not, you know, as an old college professor, I can always give you a pop quiz. So, questions? What would you like to hear more about? We've got a microphone coming your way.
Test it.
There you go.
I would actually like to hear more from Sarah and how you, as a mathematician, kind of like saw the kind of journey of all the choreography, and kind of like from all your, all the math and stuff, how did like that make you think deeper into what you studied, just watching that development?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really amazing question. So as a mathematician, there's definitely a lot of really foreign stuff about this, right? Seeing a stage and performers and all of this stuff. So basically the way that the process went was while Rose was choreographing things, she'd bring me little video clips or send things to me and be like, hey, I'm doing this thing. And I would look at it and be like, oh, this reminds me of this thing that I studied. So in my math, I work in a field called topology. I basically study shapes and what they might look like in higher dimensions. And so we would talk about our hypercube and go back and forth about ideas and things that, dance things that reminded me of some math thing, or math things that reminded her of some dance thing. And it led to this really cool piece.
Well, what else would you like to know? We could do that pop quiz. Yes, just saving all of your friends.
Thank you. I just want to know if they have fun. It looks from this end, I'm not a mathematician and I don't, but it looks like you guys have lots of fun, and I wonder if personally you learned something differently or different about math or about yourself in doing this.
Would you like to take that?
Frankly, you told them I first.
We can both go, because I feel everyone gets a different experience while participating in a piece like this. In my experience, this is my first time delving into the world of flamenco. And from my short experience so far, because I started last year, November, I would describe flamenco as a delicate balance of weight, of your weight. And that was challenging for me because it's a different consciousness of where you're placing your weight and consciousness of your body. And flamenco is also a lot of deception. Like you might think a move, is one way, but it looks that way because how you position your body. So there's just like a lot of deception that you can do with your body. I learned a lot being part of this performance, and for me, one of the biggest lessons, aside from the learning the technicality, the musicality, a little bit of the history of flamenco, was that for me, I think, coming from the pandemic, one of the things that became, and still being in pandemic, one of the things that became clear to me is that we have to revisit the basics, we have to revisit history, so that we don't get amnesia from it, and revisit history in a very, delicate way. And in this piece, I learned that, during colonization, I used to think before that it was only the old world, Spain, that influenced Latin America, but it actually was not the case. That knowledge and interchange of knowledge happened both ways. Specifically, Cuba had a huge impact on Spain. And one of the rhythms that we dance today came as an influence from Cuba. And Cuba was one of the biggest, was the jewel of the crown back in the days. So, and seeing, how flamenco also has been a dance that was used as a form of resistance, and the way that, hip hop as well. I'm very, new to it, but, seeing like the diversity of hip hop and seeing, how revolutionary hip hop has been too, was also a learning lesson. So I think, being part of this piece helped me to revisit that and to learn something that I had learned, and to see that, colonization was something way more complex than we are told, in that, knowledge went both ways. Specifically, the New World had a lot of impact on the Old World, and that should be acknowledged.
No, I agree. I do agree. I mean, for me, as a dancer and everything, as an instructor as well, it's like, how many of you have like tablets, laptops, stuff like that, like electronic devices, right? How many of you go into the BIOS and actually check out all the code that goes on behind the lines of what you do? Now imagine being the engineer that built it. That's what it feels like, because anybody that knows engineering on that level will say, dude, oh my gosh, or lady, oh my gosh, I just built this program. Yeah, it took me 4 hours and I didn't sleep all night, but look what I did. As a dancer, we do that on instinct. But when you're called to look back at the technicalities of what you do, I've been spinning on my head. I've been doing dancing like this for about 19 years. And it's always been a feeling for me. It's always been oh, hey, I know that if I kick with exactly the right amount of force on this leg, I can get onto my head and I can balance that point between falling and not falling enough to glide for a little bit and then transition into a lower spin, build up gravity, build up speed. But when you have to do it with mathematical precision and you're aware of it, it allows you to not only appreciate the artisanship of being a dancer, but also being able to collaborate and even transcend certain boundaries, like different languages, different cultures, different counts, different measures, different beats. And it allows you to be able to not use Google Translate anymore. You can actually be like, oh, So I can go and speak another language with my movement, or I can use hand language, sign language, I can use visual cues. It opens up another door that most people don't take time to look at, just like most people don't look at the BIOS until the computer starts booting up, right? But the creativity in it is if you look at the fact that someone sat down one day and said, I'm gonna make all of these equations, and these equations build on top of this program executes, this execution creates what you know as Windows or Mac OS, and I enjoy the experience of using said device that's running this particular operating system. You get to understand that it's not as complicated as we might have thought. It only appears complicated because you are now aware of how intensely amazing you are as a mover in any aspect.
Well, that was quite an interesting question and interesting answers.
So, amazing performance. I really like the beats and everything. I really liked it a lot. Thank you. And as you mentioned, it's similar to computation that you have to think and do everything precisely, but you're not alone. There are multiple cores, right? And they have to get synced. And then they have to go in. And I'm amazed at how the rhythm joined how many different styles very elegantly. Congratulations. I'm amazed with that. I'm amazed with the hypercube that we are all living in the dimension and that we're trying to break it and we're going through it. Great performance, great example of math hidden in a movement. Well, as you said, back to motion. Thanks.
Thanks for that. Yes.
Thank you. I echo that all of the performances were awesome, so thank you. And in the last piece, I thought it was really cool how you blended the break dance and the hip hop with the flamenco, and I wanted to know what, maybe continuing along the theme you've already started, what were some of the similarities and differences that you found between those styles, and were there any connections that you didn't realize were there?
So finding the similarities and differences was one of the goals of this project. We approached it as a time to exchange knowledge and inspire some new ideas, and then from there grow the piece that you saw on stage. And so for similarities and differences, there are some, let's see, I'm gonna try to sum up some of the comments that we've had like backstage and in our sessions together. There are some rhythmic ideas. At the core, the two forms share a common root in rhythm, and it is in the African diaspora. And it's quite interesting, as Carla was saying, how the world has informed itself over and over again, back and forth and back and forth. So we have this common root that is part of that informing and reinforming. And then it has led to some other rhythmic ideas that we find both in hip-hop, in the hip-hop genre and music, and then in flamenco. And in flamenco, we have it not only in the music, but in our percussive dance. And I see it in the footwork of the hip-hop dancers. Then there's some jumps. We have the threading jump and this kind of a call that we use. This jump is in all kinds of dance forms. But it's really interesting, the crossover that we have in hip-hop there. We found some other similarities in terms of the fact that we share this idea of the semicircle. We call it a semi-cipher in this project because this is the shape of this half circle, or maybe this cipher is the whole circle. And in flamenco, we have the same thing. Everybody stands in a circle, we get some music going, and somebody goes into dance, and somebody comes out. And so there are, on like the social side, there are some shared elements. Musically, there are some shared elements, and then also in the movement, there are some other elements. And these are just some examples. And you know, we hope to continue this work to be able to, while we have a great community of flamenco here and a great community of hip hop here, to be able to explore this and see what it reveals to us.
Anyone curious about juggling or unicycling?
Yeah, as for me, I ride my unicycle to and from class every day, so I'm on it. almost every single day of the week. The big one that you see in the front of the stage is the one that I use to get around college campus at Georgia Tech. And then I'll practice on the weekends with the Unicycle Club at Georgia Tech and otherwise. So, pretty often.
Anthony not only rides all the time, should you be inspired, he teaches unicycling. Yeah.
I have a question again, sorry for the unicycle. Which one is the one that takes you the most energy to ride?
Oh.
So the last one, the Rouleau Triangle unicycle, you could probably hear the difference between the ones that were rolling on stage with a rubber tire versus the noise that that made. So that takes a lot of energy and that's pretty difficult. But in general, if you're just asking about unicycles, like in general, the smaller the wheel, the slower you can go on average, but it's usually a little bit easier. So if I'm taking the really big wheel, which has a 36-inch diameter, up a hill, you're stuck basically in high gear on a bicycle pedaling uphill. So you build some muscle after a while and you definitely sweat in the summers.
So for me, I had the larger wheeled one, so I feel like that would be more energy needing than the others. However, the smallest one, just because of how many times revolutions, you're just like hands around the wheel. So you just go a lot, like use a lot of energy just to move just a small amount. So both of them take a lot of energy just to move.
Yeah, it's not surprising that the triangle wheel one was particularly hard to ride. This is a work in progress. This really was the premiere of the unicycle that was invented by our local unicycle inventor, Paul Hartman. He also put together the one with the non-centered pedals. And I'm trying to lob some other mathematical ideas by him to see what else will come out of those. So come back next year. Who's ready to do some juggling out there?
I had a question for the juggler. I've known a lot of really great jugglers who happen to be good mathematicians and vice versa. What was it for you and how do you like the similarities between?
Oh, what's the connection between math and juggling? I think the biggest connection is both mathematicians and jugglers have no other friends or anything. So you have a lot of time, and with that time, those are two of the things you can do.
There you have it. What other questions can we tell you? Can we answer?
I had a question about the unicycle in the middle. Do you need any support when you get on and off?
You mean this tall one here?
Yeah.
That's called a giraffe. Tell them about the giraffe.
So with any unicycle, I've taught a lot of people to unicycle, and anybody who starts always has to hold on to a wall or a person or a shoulder. But the more comfortable you get, you can start to get on by yourself. It's just like learning to walk. When you were a baby, you had to hold on to your parents' hand. But you probably don't have to do that now. Hopefully not. And so just like any other thing that you're learning, it just takes a lot of practice. And so on the tall one, I had to start by hanging from a rafter in my garage and then lowering myself onto it. And then eventually I was able to learn to get up on it on my own. So it takes a lot of practice, but you can pretty much learn anything if you put the time into it.
That business of jumping on the wheels, what do you call it? Free mounting. That's how you know somebody's a really serious cyclist. Other questions?
I was curious about who built the unicycles and
Who built them?
Yeah.
It's a fellow named Paul Hartman. He's sort of a high-level electrician as his day job, but he's a person who goes to Burning Man and such things. And so, very creative fellow, and creates wonderful mathematical puzzles too, by the way. Mathematical puzzles and unicycles, and I don't know what else. Anthony probably known him longer than I have, but just a very creative fellow. We thought we might be able to get him here today, but he wasn't able. Well,
Awesome.
anybody here have something that they want to ask or share?
Any other questions from our audience as well?
Well, thank you for coming. This production was a very complicated collaboration of many people and really couldn't have happened without dozens of people being involved. And so I'd like to say a few words of thanks to all of them. I'll start with our sponsors, the Atlanta Science Festival and Drew Charter School. We had 3 people from Drew Charter School who showed up on the Sunday to help us. Sean Anderson was here before I was, a little before 8 a.m. this morning, and he's still here, so that was great. And Stephen Anderson and Courtney Bryant also were heavily involved and here earlier today. We had 3 or 4 volunteers from the Atlanta Science Festival who helped take the tickets and helped do a lot of things. I probably can't list all of our volunteers, but they really made it happen in many ways. I should, though, in particular, mention Sarah and Catherine, who was backstage interfacing with the stage team. We have a wonderful group of people who were part of the show, and without which would have been just really wouldn't have happened. So we have behind the scenes there, we have Greg Cavalier, who was doing lighting and many other technical things, basically being stage manager. We have Flint and Abby Barrow, who were doing the sound and many other things, helping us organize. We have a videographer who has been live streaming us, and we will have her work shared on our YouTube channel. Anne-Marie Spexit, who's been part of Mathematics in Motion for some years. We have these wonderful performers who, and the others who had to go at the end of the day. And of course, of many kinds, performers of many skills, unicyclists, dancers of what a variety that got together over mathematics. That's amazing. And of course, we have our creative personnel, the people who did the choreography, Julie and Rose, and trying to think who else was part of the team. But it was about 30 people that it took to put this together, and they did a wonderful job, and I'm so appreciative of everything that they did.